So, I was hoping I could ask about your education.
Sure. So I actually am a grad of UNM. I got my bachelor's degree in Spanish and sociology. So I double majored in that, and then my master's degree in family studies. It's now called family and child development, I think, but it was family studies back then. I am at ABD basically with my doctorate at New Mexico State University. So that's been kind of my trajectory in terms of education, but always kind of leading towards education and people.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Are you interested in taking any classes offered by UNM coming up?
I'm not looking at taking any classes right now, but I was just talking to a student, and I'm going to forget the name of a class, but it was an anthropology class, and I forgot what Karina was telling me in terms of the name of the actual class, but it just sounded really cool. I was like, might have to audit that class or, go ahead and enroll. But I'm really interested in classes where you get to talk about, what's happening in society, what are the trends, who are people, like anything where, like I love Chicano and Chicana studies classes. I came to undergrad here when we had a program, but we didn't have a degree in it yet.
Wow.
But all my classes, I think if you were to look at my transcript, like my sociology and Spanish transcript, I think they would all accumulate to be a Chicano and Chicana studies, degree, just because I was so interested in Latinidad, the Chicano movement, the history of New Mexico. Like, that's just been always something that's fascinated me. So I would love to take those kinds of classes where I can continue to learn about my history and people in general.
Yeah. So why is your work important to you?
To me. So, I came as a student. I have the privilege that I wasn't first gen. Both my parents, I exist because they met in college at Highlands in Las Vegas, New Mexico. And so when I came to college, I honestly came because I was the first in my family of my siblings, and I was the oldest. So I'm the oldest of 6. I have 2 brothers and 3 sisters.
Wow.
And so I was also the first granddaughter on my dad's side of the family. I was the first grandchild. So I've always had this sense of like duty and responsibility and like setting good examples, right? And so when I came just because my dad was like, you're coming to college, there's no ands, ifs, or buts. My dad loves education. He loves school. He taught middle school for 30 years, so that's always been instilled. Him and my mom always instilled a sense of education and how that can be a tool that we can use. And then I got to see my dad work in the union, in the education union in Bernalillo. And he was the president for many years and worked hard to negotiate good contracts for, the teachers and all of that. And so all of that, given with all of my New Mexico history, my mom's side of the family, just learning about culture and traditions. So when I came to UNM, I came because it was an expectation. But when I got here, El Centro became this place of like home for me. So I just connected here. The director at the time was like, you need a work study job. I was like, no, I have a scholarship. For the first time in a long time, I'm not going to work. I'm just going to go to school. And she's like, no, you need a work study job. And I had work study, but she was like, no, you start. It was like a Tuesday, Wednesday. She goes, come Thursday. And I was like, oh, no, but I have class. She goes, let me see your schedule. She's like, oh, you could come at 11. And so that one conversation, kind of led me to being in this space, to seeing student movement, to seeing how support is important to students. And then what it became for me in some of the most challenging times when I questioned, why am I here? Why am I in college? And, what's the point of school? And, all of these things. Getting involved at El Centro really showed me the power that students have and the agency that I could have and the change that I could offer. And so the work that's important is because students learn who they are and the power that they have, right? And so I think that to me is just like the most amazing thing. So yeah.
What made you choose this field of work?
Honestly, it was my experience. If you had asked me when I first started here at UNM, I came as a business major. I was like going to be an international traveler. That was like my dream at the time. And I took my first sociology class and I was like, wait, people get paid to study people? Like, this is a thing? And it just like grabbed my attention so much. And And then I had an opportunity where I became a NASPA fellow. And NASPA is the National Association of Student Personnel Administrators. So it's the professional association of student affairs professionals across the country. One of them, there's a couple. But through that process, I ended up getting a mentor. Two actually co-mentored me outside of the center, because the director from the center at the time was like, you need to also go and explore other things. And so, I got involved outside of the center. I was on the student union board, just did different things. But this program allowed me to explore the profession of student affairs. And I just fell in love with it. The ability to see a student walk in the door shy and then, walk out the door confident and sometimes still shy, but knowing that they have the abilities to do whatever they want, right? Or just coming in and seeing students, just the way they blossom over time being here, regardless at what time of their life they come in, whether it's an undergrad student who's brand new out of high school, or it's a returning non-traditional student who, has a family and is coming back after 20 years and decided they want a college degree. Just seeing the evolution of that. And so when I got to see that through the fellowship as well, and then the work here, it felt right. So my dad likes to tease me because I said, I'm never going to be a teacher. And he's all, you may not be a teacher, he's all, but you are maybe a teacher of life and the system and how to get through. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And so, yeah.
Is there something about El Centro that you wish more people knew?
Oh, there's so many things. I think that I wish people would know how diverse El Centro is. I think oftentimes when people hear the name or they see one day in the life of El Centro, like one little snippet, they sometimes don't recognize that what they saw in those 5 minutes is what's happening in there all the time, right? So I've had students come in and say I find out years later that they're like, yeah, I went, but I was a little intimidated, so I just walked out. Or I went and everybody was speaking Spanish and I didn't know Spanish, or I wanted to go practice my Spanish and I only heard English being spoken. And so one of the things is that we're a really diverse community of all backgrounds, all ethnicities, skin color, economic backgrounds. There's just a mix, and there's so many great people to meet, right? And so I wish people would maybe step out of their comfort zone sometimes and then just take a chance. And then, let the journey be what it needs to be.
If you can, in one sentence, how would you describe Hispanic culture? Because I know it's like this vast, huge, amazing thing.
Yeah. No, there's so much, right? I mean, whether you're talking about the art, the history, it's represented in music. There's so many different ways, right? And I think it means something different to everybody you ask, just because all of our experiences are different, right? We may have some similar or shared experiences, but at the end of the day, our unique experience is unique, right? And so for me, though, what it means and what I feel it can mean is, I think things that bring us together. So I think it's a sense of familia, so family, right? It's a sense of community, comunidad, and it brings a mix of all of our experiences together. And so I think that it's all of those things, right? And it doesn't have to be one thing or another. It's also the sense of vibrancy. There's a sense of spirit that it's just an energy that I can't quite explain, but it's you feel it in the colors of art, you feel it in the beats of the music, you feel it in the depth of the histories, right? And so I think all of those things, to me, we just took a group of students to Mexico for our mental health collaborative. You told me one sentence. I don't have one sentence.
You're fine.
I just realized.
You're fine.
But I'll tell you real quickly. The students, when we were there, they were like, I've grown up in New Mexico. I've grown up in the States. And I've always connected as Mexican-American, but I've never really had the experience of being here in Mexico or being this far south in Mexico, right? So maybe they've been to the northern part of Mexico, but didn't really and seeing all the smells and the pictures and the colors and the everything, the sounds and sights, was just the sense of home, right? And so if I were to say it in one sense, it's home.
So, what about Hispanic culture at UNM? Because I know that's completely different when it's talking about like Hispanic culture as a whole.
Right. Well, I think UNM over the years has really expanded. I think when I first came here many years ago, it was really focused on a very traditional New Mexican and Mexican background of sorts, if you will. And now I see students from all over Latin America. You hear different like dialects of Spanish, right? You hear different experiences. And so I feel like here at UNM, you're seeing it in a sense. I had a student today, we had a car show outside, right? PNMJC organized a lowrider car show, you know, and we helped support with some different things. And when a student said, I really felt represented on campus.
Oh.
I felt like I belonged here just walking by and seeing the lowriders. And it's such a random thing, but it's so culturally connected for many New Mexicans, you know, and maybe actually nationwide, that I think that it just allowed them to be like, oh, I do belong here. So Hispanic culture at UNM is always in flux, right? Because students come with such a different experience, and then what they learn about themselves. So it's definitely always evolutionary, right? It's always like evolving and changing with the students that are here, because the Hispanic culture that's here is the students who are here and what they want to share with the world.
Why is El Centro important to UNM, and what value does El Centro bring to UNM?
Well, I think the value is that it definitely knows how to meet students where they're at. You know, we have some amazing programs that provide students opportunities that without them, they'd figure out how to make it, but they would have a harder time. It opens up the doors for students who are traditionally from first-gen families, from low-income families, underrepresented students who don't have somebody to guide them through the university system, right? The university is complex. There's a lot of systems. There's a lot of language that it has its own language, I should say, as an institution. And so what we bring is that we bring the opportunity for students to find a way to connect and stay, right? And give them the opportunities to also see themselves reflected, because I think a big part of what we're missing often in institutions is that we miss who people are. And that's equally important with what they're here to do, right? And so I think that's the value that we bring. We also just have amazing programs and opportunities that provide students the chance to blossom, right? To fully extend their wings and figure out what they want to do. And, you know, being in a university that's in the middle of New Mexico, where the largest population is Hispanic, although New Mexico is very diverse, and I think people don't know that, right? It's so diverse. It's not a tri-cultural state. It's a multicultural state. I think UNM reflects that. And when we look at the Hispanic population in particular, it is the largest student group. And what are we doing to ensure that they're getting across the finish line, right? And so that's the value we bring is helping students get through to that finish line.
What is a typical day for you, like at El Centro?
Oh my God. I don't think I have a typical day, which I think is part of the fun of my job, right? Because I do a lot of advocacy. I work with students a lot, trying to, you know, how do I talk to a professor, those kinds of things. But I could start out with, typically there's a cup of coffee involved with my students at some point, some of our staff, always a smiling face around here, you know, and then I fluctuate between activities, meeting with students, going to administrative meetings. Today was like one of my favorite days. You know, I got here early. We were cutting up fruit to get ready for our event. The event went on all morning. You know, I'm meeting with you. So I'm able to do a little bit of everything. But those are the best days when I get to hang out with students. And a typical day is also doing administrative work, answering emails, you know, figuring out our budgets, figuring out how we're going to pay for things, or advocating for us to get funding, advocating for changes that make life easier for students in a positive way, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
But thank you so much for meeting with me.
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you.